Nasara's eyes narrowed to slits, a flicker of that unearthly green shining behind them. "You dare blaspheme in the house of the divine?" she hissed, her voice resonating unnaturally. "Hello, my friends. I'm Amina, and this is my wise companion, Nia Tembo. We're so happy you're here to enjoy one of our favourite African folktales. If you love what we do, please support us by subscribing. It's completely free, but it helps us more than you know. And don't go anywhere. Stay with us until the very end to hear Nia Tembo's special words of wisdom. You won't want to miss it." The village of Zambulu was alive with anticipation. It was the day of the great gathering at the Divine Well of Light Ministries, a church that had transformed from a simple wooden shack into a golden sanctuary under the reign of the renowned prophetess Nasara. Rumours abounded that she could speak with spirits, heal the gravely ill, and foresee disaster before it struck. Some swore she could summon fire from the heavens if the need arose, while others whispered that she possessed the ears of the gods themselves. Among the eager worshippers stood Adanna, a sharp-eyed weaver who had encountered her share of charlatans. Unlike most of the crowd, she didn't jump or cheer at every word Nasara uttered. Instead, she observed with quiet skepticism as the prophetess appeared in a dazzling white robe, her braided hair bound by a golden headpiece. Nasara's voice rang through the church like a perfectly tuned instrument, her every phrase mesmerizing the congregation. And yet, behind her honeyed words and graceful demeanor, Adanna sensed something off, like a lurking shadow beneath crystal-clear waters. Just then, a paralyzed man was carried forward on a makeshift stretcher. At the sight of him, the crowd erupted in hopeful murmurs. Nasara raised her hand in a dramatic flourish and declared, "Rise and walk!" A collective gasp swept the hall as the man rose unsteadily to his feet, his once limp legs trembling but functional. The sanctuary exploded with cheers. It was a spectacle worthy of the many rumours surrounding Nasara's power. But Adanna, ever vigilant, noticed a fleeting detail. She recognised this man's face. Only days before, she had seen him strolling confidently through the village market, entirely unencumbered. Alarm bells rang in her mind. Was this a true miracle, or an elaborate show? A spark of doubt ignited within her. While the rest of Zambulu cheered this apparent wonder, Adanna wondered if they were all part of something far darker than they realised. That evening, as the sky transitioned to a deep purple over Zambulu, Adanna sat outside her modest hut, working on a new tapestry by lantern light. Her fingers were busy weaving intricate patterns, but her mind drifted repeatedly to the miracle she had witnessed earlier that day. Something felt profoundly wrong, and the nagging suspicion refused to let her rest. Her closest friend, Osei, approached, carrying another small lantern that flickered in the light evening breeze. Osei was a quiet thinker, a man who, like Adanna, rarely took things at face value. He settled beside her on a low stool. "You are troubled," he stated simply, picking at a stray thread on his tunic. Adanna sighed, setting aside her weaving. "Osei, I saw the crippled man walking before. Days ago, he was at the market, moving around perfectly fine. Yet, there he was today, pretending to be unable to walk until Nasara healed him." Osei's brow tightened. "Are you absolutely certain?" "I am," Adanna said firmly. She recalled the man's face, the casual stride he'd had, and how he haggled with a fishmonger. It was impossible for her to be mistaken. Osei took a moment to mull over her words. "Then, you must tread carefully. Prophetess Nasara is not just any woman. There are whispers in the wind, tales that she communes with spirits, and that at night she disappears without a trace. Some claim to have glimpsed strange figures by the river behind her temple." A chill coursed through Adanna. She had heard similar rumours, but never from someone as grounded as Osei. If she can fake miracles, who knows what else she's capable of? They exchanged a grave look. The once festive air of Zambulu now felt tinged with unease. "We need to find the truth," Adanna said softly. Osei nodded, and the two friends silently resolved that they would not stand idle while darkness, and possibly deception, took root in their village. Later that night, driven by equal parts curiosity and fear, Adanna and Osei crept through the outskirts of Zambulu toward the wide river that glinted under the pale moonlight. The path was lined with tall grasses and a few twisted trees that cast eerie shadows. They carried no torch, relying instead on the moon to guide them, for they knew any hint of light might expose their presence to prying eyes. They crouched behind a cluster of dense reeds just as the doors of Nasara's temple, standing by the river's edge, opened. A single figure glided forth. It was Nasara, her white robes seeming to glow in the moon's reflection. She moved with an otherworldly grace, her motions almost too fluid to be entirely human. Halting at the riverbank, the prophetess raised her arms. A soft, melodic chant drifted across the water, each syllable unfamiliar to Adanna and Osei. As they watched, the wind seemed to shift, swirling around Nasara like it was at her command. The river's surface rippled, disturbed by invisible forces. Then came the transformation. Adanna's eyes widened in horror as Nasara's legs began to fuse together, her skin becoming dark, glistening scales that caught the moonlight. Her posture changed. She appeared impossibly tall, head tilted back with luminous green eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness. A moment later, she slithered forward, her lower half now a serpentine tail, and vanished beneath the surface with scarcely a sound. Osei clamped a hand over his mouth to stifle any involuntary gasp, while Adanna felt her heart pound so fiercely she feared it might give them away. The rumours, the staged miracle, all paled in comparison to this unspeakable truth. Nasara was no mere fraud. She was something ancient and chillingly powerful. After several excruciating moments, Osei tugged at Adanna's sleeve, and they retreated into the night. Whatever confronted them now, it was beyond their wildest imaginings, and they had no idea how Zambulu would survive the evil they had just witnessed. Dawn broke over Zambulu with a serene brilliance, but Adanna felt no sense of calm. She and Osei met behind her weaving stall in the marketplace, hushed and tense. It was market day, and people bustled about buying and selling goods, but Adanna's focus never strayed from the conversation at hand. "We have to do something," she whispered urgently. "That thing, Nasara, she's dangerous. I saw it with my own eyes." Osei nodded, his usually steady demeanour marred by unease. "If we confront her outright, we could be in grave danger. Who knows what power she wields, or how many people in this village are loyal to her?" Adanna felt a surge of frustration. "So we do nothing? Just stand by while she deceives everyone?" Osei's face tightened. "We must be smart about it. We need proof, or allies, something that can protect us when we expose her. Otherwise, we risk our lives for nothing." Later that day, they sought out Nthanda, an elderly woman rumoured to have studied the old ways. Her hut was on the outskirts of the village, surrounded by an overgrown garden of rare herbs. The moment they told her what they had seen, Nthanda's expression grew grim. "When I was a girl," she murmured, "my grandmother spoke of the Serpent Kings, ancient spirits that bargain with the living, trading earthly power for dark sacrifices. If Nasara is indeed in league with them, then she will not stop. She will bleed this village dry to maintain her unholy pact." Adanna's heart pounded. "But how do we fight something like this?" Nthanda reached for a worn, leather-bound tome on a creaking shelf. "We stand together. We use knowledge from the old traditions. Only if the people unite can we cast out the darkness." A heavy silence descended, Adanna and Osei realised their burden. They must rouse a village entranced by false miracles before it was too late. Over the next few days, hushed rumours circulated like embers that refused to die. Adanna and Osei, driven by Nthanda's warnings, began sharing what they'd seen with a select few who already harboured doubts about Nasara. Some were farmers who felt exploited by the church's exorbitant miracle fees, while others were neighbours of the healed cripple who swore they'd seen him sprinting around at dawn. As whispers turned to quiet resolve, a small group formed, a rebellion of sorts. They met under the cover of darkness in a neglected barn behind the village fruit orchard. There, Adanna recounted the horrifying transformation, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. While shock rippled through the gathering, a grim understanding also took hold. They needed to act, but Nasara was no fool. She sensed a shift in the villagers' attitude. Attendance at her daily deliverance sessions remained high, but she caught glimpses of wary eyes and hesitant offerings. She watched as certain families stood farther back than usual, or rushed out of the temple as soon as services ended. She noted who whispered among themselves instead of praising her out loud. In response, Nasara intensified her sermons, weaving in dire warnings of curses befalling those who doubted. She declared that the village stood on the brink of a great calamity, one that only she could avert through intercession with the divine realm. Many villagers, terrified of the unknown, clung to her words more tightly than ever. Yet a growing minority remained skeptical, emboldened by Adanna and Osei's revelations. One evening, a brave farmer named Bako spoke up in the middle of Nasara's service. "Why do you demand more and more offerings, Prophetess?" he questioned. A collective gasp spread among the congregation. In that charged moment, Nasara's eyes flickered with a hint of unnatural green, and her lips curled in a half-snarl. She silenced Bako with a fierce stare, but the damage was done. The first rebellion had begun, and no amount of intimidation could erase the seeds of dissent that had been planted in Zambulu's soil. Nasara wasted no time retaliating against the spread of dissent. The very night after Bako dared to question her, a wave of unsettling events shook the village. Chickens vanished from coops, only to be found later with their necks cleanly snapped. No signs of a typical predator. Wells that once ran pure were discovered tainted with bitter-tasting water, leaving families fearful of poisoning. Word travelled that Bako himself woke up the next morning feverish and delirious, claiming to see serpents crawling up his walls in broad daylight. Whispers of witchcraft and curses once again swept the village, sending some of the newly emboldened skeptics scurrying back into silent compliance. Despite the ominous undercurrent, Adanna, Osei, and their small group of rebels pressed on. Each malicious act only confirmed their suspicions. Nasara was no ordinary spiritual leader. She was playing with powers beyond mortal understanding, and she would use those powers to crush any opposition. While the fearful retreated, a handful of villagers, hardened by tragedy, anger, or unwavering faith in truth, drew closer to Adanna's cause. They met in secret, behind abandoned huts or under centuries-old baobab trees. Nthanda joined them whenever she could, bringing passages from her grandmother's old tome. These pages hinted at counter-rituals and protective charms that might shield them from Nasara's influence. To gather indisputable proof, Osei risked sneaking near the temple late at night, hoping to witness Nasara's transformations again. Hiding among tall reeds, he heard her chanting in that same strange tongue, saw murky shapes writhing beneath the surface of the river. Though he longed to run, he forced himself to stay, trembling in the shadows. Meanwhile, Nasara proclaimed an urgent new prophecy. A great disaster would soon strike Zambulu if the congregation did not increase their offerings and purge the village of betrayers. The tension thickened like a storm cloud about to unleash its fury. Zambulu was on the brink of open conflict, and none could say which side would prevail. Despite the cloak of fear Nasara had cast, the resistance gained momentum. Adanna and Osei knew they needed more than a handful of supporters to stand any chance against the dark forces at Nasara's command. With Nthanda's guidance, they carefully expanded their circle, inviting villagers who had nothing left to lose, or who had already shown an instinctive doubt in Nasara's methods. They convened at different locations each time: a deserted yam field, a shallow cave by the rocky hills, or an abandoned goat pen, never meeting twice in the same spot to avoid suspicion. At one such gathering, the group numbered nearly 20 villagers, all huddled close as Osei recounted his midnight spy mission near the temple. Gasps and murmurs of alarm filled the air as he described the murky silhouettes he saw beneath the river's surface. Nthanda read aloud from her grandmother's tome, revealing ancient incantations said to repel serpent spirits. She explained that any direct confrontation with Nasara would require these incantations, along with relics blessed by a pure-hearted elder. The tension in the small group was palpable. They were devout farmers, traders, and artisans, unaccustomed to subterfuge or spiritual warfare. Yet the alternative, doing nothing, was unthinkable. Meanwhile, word reached them that Nasara had grown increasingly erratic. Some said she wandered the village at dawn, peering into windows, searching for signs of dissent. Others reported hearing inhuman hisses echoing from the temple at night. Still, the Sunday sermons continued, drawing large crowds of both the faithful and the fearful. Nasara had begun calling out doubters by name, warning them of dire consequences if they opposed her. This only hardened the rebels' resolve. Adanna, though terrified, accepted a leadership role in the resistance, working tirelessly with Osei to coordinate efforts. More villagers, having lost family members to suspicious illnesses or bizarre disappearances, decided they would rather fight than submit. The final plan began to take shape. They would confront Nasara in public, revealing her serpent form before everyone's eyes. If their stand succeeded, they might free Zambulu from her clutches, or risk unleashing an even greater horror upon them all. The chosen day arrived under a searing midday sun that cast harsh shadows across Zambulu. The entire village had gathered at the Divine Well of Light Ministries for what Nasara claimed would be her greatest miracle yet. Whispers of impending doom and miraculous salvation alike coursed through the crowd, creating a tense, electric atmosphere. Adanna and Osei stood near the back, surrounded by members of the secret resistance. Each carried a small talisman on a string around their neck, tokens Nthanda had painstakingly blessed in a midnight ritual. They could only hope it would protect them from whatever dark magic Nasara might unleash. Nasara appeared at the pulpit in her resplendent robe, golden headpiece gleaming under the sun. She surveyed the congregation with a knowing air, as though she could sense the rebellious hearts beating among them. With dramatic flair, she raised her arms and invoked a supposed divine presence. The crowd fell silent, hanging on her every word. That was the moment Adanna chose to step forward. Her voice trembled at first, but she steadied herself. "Prophetess Nasara," she called, projecting as loudly as she could manage, "we have witnessed your false miracles. We have seen your true nature. Show everyone here who you really are." A ripple of shock tore through the congregation. Some gasped, others shouted for her to be silent. Nasara's eyes narrowed to slits, a flicker of that unearthly green shining behind them. "You dare blaspheme in the house of the divine?" she hissed, her voice resonating unnaturally. Osei joined Adanna, holding up his blessed talisman. "No more lies! We know what you do by the river, and we know about the Serpent Kings you serve. Let these people see the truth. A palpable tension weighed on the crowd, as though the very air had thickened. With a rage-filled cry, Nasara's carefully crafted human veneer began to slip. Her shape flickered, the edges of her body shimmering. The congregation stood in stunned silence, teetering on the edge of belief and horror as the final veil began to tear away. Nasara let loose a shriek that rattled the wooden rafters of the sanctuary. Her golden robe seemed to contort, and a hissing sound filled the air. Before the wide eyes of the congregation, the lower half of her body elongated into a snake's tail, covered in dark, iridescent scales. The once fawning worshippers recoiled, screams erupting from every corner of the temple. With a savage glare, Nasara lunged toward Adanna, who stumbled back in terror. However, a handful of brave villagers dashed forward, thrusting out their blessed talismans. An eerie glow emitted from the charms, forming a faint barrier that forced Nasara to recoil, emitting another piercing hiss. The walls of the temple seemed to tremble with unseen power, as though the Serpent Kings themselves raged at this betrayal. Osei shouted for the crowd to flee, but many villagers stood their ground, anger surging within them. They began chanting an improvised call for deliverance, some reciting old lullabies taught by their grandparents, others repeating phrases from Nthanda's tome. The cacophony created a wave of raw faith that clashed with Nasara's malevolent presence. Naledi, a young mother whose son had mysteriously fallen ill under Nasara's watch, led a group that cornered the prophetess near the temple's altar. Despite her serpentine strength, Nasara writhed in panic, pinned down by the intangible force of collective defiance. Adanna, trembling but resolute, seized a wooden staff from the corner and joined Naledi in pressing forward. Roars of thunder boomed outside, and the sky darkened as if mirroring Nasara's fury. Her serpentine eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the temple floor, hissing curses in that strange language. The ground shook with an echo of the Serpent King's wrath, but their champion on earth was weakening. In a final act of desperation, Nasara tried to slither toward the temple doors, seeking refuge in the river beyond. But the villagers pursued, chanting and brandishing their talismans with unwavering resolve. At last, with a deafening crash of thunder, Nasara collapsed. The unholy glimmer left her eyes, and a wailing wind seemed to carry her final screech far into the heavens, or the depths below. Zambulu fell quiet, save for the laboured breaths of those who had dared stand against darkness. They had won, or so it seemed. In the aftermath, a heavy rain swept across Zambulu, as though cleansing the village of the evil that had lingered within its golden sanctuary. The battered temple stood half empty, its once grand aura shattered. Villagers spoke in hushed tones about the horrors they had witnessed, the monstrous half-serpent form, the twisted powers, and the dreadful cost of defying Nasara. It took days for the initial shock to subside. Families gathered under thatched roofs to share stories of lost livestock, strange nightmares, and close calls with the prophetess they had once revered. Adanna and Osei became reluctant heroes, with many thanking them for revealing the truth before the entire village was swallowed by darkness. Still, a persistent unease hovered in the air. Nthanda visited the temple's remains, carefully performing a protective ritual with her blessed herbs. The deeper she delved into her grandmother's tome, the more she discovered. The Serpent Kings seldom released their chosen willingly, and rumours suggested that if a champion fell, the malevolent spirits would seek another vessel. Every rustle of the river grass or inexplicable ripple in the water fed the villagers' anxieties. Was it truly over? One evening, as Adanna and Osei strolled by the river, they paused at the spot where they had first glimpsed Nasara's transformation. It was eerily still, the moonlight reflecting off the gentle current. Adanna shivered, recalling how easily Zambulu had been enthralled. We won, right? Osei asked quietly, almost as if trying to reassure himself. Adanna hesitated, then gave a small nod. We did, for now. Just then, they heard a soft splash. The water rippled, and they glimpsed a child standing ankle-deep at the river's edge, staring vacantly across the moonlit surface. As the child turned, Adanna's heart nearly stopped. In the child's dark irises, a faint but unmistakable greenish glow flickered and then vanished. They rushed forward, but the child simply blinked, looking confused. Without another word, he ambled off toward the village. Adanna and Osei exchanged horrified glances, an unspoken dread confirming what Nthander had warned them about. The Serpent King's presence had not left Zambulu. It had merely bided its time, searching for a new host to carry on Nasara's cursed legacy. Wow, thank you so much for watching this far. Your support truly means the world to us. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It costs you nothing, but it helps us continue sharing these powerful African folktales with you. And hey, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Now, don't go anywhere because it's time for my favourite part, the wise words of Nyatembo. Trust me, you don't want to miss this.
My dear friends, in the darkest moments, when fear coils around your heart like a serpent, remember this: truth is the sharpest light. It may tremble in the shadows, but once spoken, it breaks the chains of even the most ancient lies. Adanna and Osei showed us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to stand, even when your voice shakes. Never bow to the whispers of false prophets, nor surrender your spirit to those who feed on fear. In every village, in every soul, there is a fire that no serpent can swallow. Protect it, feed it, and when the time comes, let it light the path for those still lost in the dark. And remember, little one, the story is never truly over. The wise keep watching, and the brave keep rising.